Good morning, grade 11s. Welcome to your overview of and some suggestions for your literature exam coming up in June. On your portfolio sheet, it is your task 6.2, but it is your literature exam, so paper 2 for the June exams. Right, remember that this is being recorded and will be available on your OLP a bit later on. And you'll be able to work through it at your own time, on your own pace. You can pause it where you wish to, and you can take some time to go through the practice paper that I've included here as well. All right, so what is it that you can expect in your exam? Remember, this is your literature exam, so all of the poetry that you've studied so far can be asked of you, and your novel, as far as you've read by now, can be tested. All right, so your My Family and Other Animals. You have 2.5 hours in which to complete 70 marks. It's more than enough time, grade 11s, I'm sure, for you to work through your paper at a good pace without causing too much panic for yourself, especially if you've done some good preparations beforehand. All right, so I always like you to just recap a few things, the things you can control beforehand. Most importantly, I want to stress to you guys that you must trust your study guides. Okay, so all your notes and activities and questions in your study guide around your novel and your poetry, you need to trust that it is comprehensive and it is a good preparation for your upcoming exam. But as a reminder, I thought I'd give you a visual of the type of question words that you can receive again. Remember, you are grade 11 now, so a little bit more sophisticated, more mature answer is what we're looking for. So you can expect any kind of critical thinking question to come up. So things like to compare or contrast, to comment on the effectiveness of something that the poet has said, and obviously for you guys as well to justify or substantiate your answer. Remember, that means you must give good reasons for why you say your answer. You must elaborate on it a little bit, and then often you need to find evidence from your text to support it as well. So either from the poem or from your novel that we're asking you of. Right, I always like you to know what to expect in your exam, so I thought I'd give you the front cover again with that set of instructions. Take time now before the exams to go through it so that you're not hit with something that makes you panic when you get your question paper on the morning. Take careful note of the instructions. They are there to guide you and make it as pleasant an experience as possible for your marker. Remember, you don't know who your marker is. So you need to make it as easy as possible for them to find your answer. So first and foremost is to try every question. Don't leave a question out, grade 11s. It's very difficult to give you a mark or look for an answer if you've literally not answered it. I would suggest that you start each section of the question paper on a new page. It leaves a bit of space at the end of each section in case you've forgotten something, or if you want to make a correction in an answer, you can put it at the bottom of that section. And then please remember to number your questions in the same order as your question paper. Even if there's an error that you found, make sure you number your answers in the same way as your question paper. Remember to write neatly. You don't know who your marker is, so you need to make it as kind a process as possible for them so that there's no excuse for them not to find your answer. Remember to use a dark pen as well, so that when you scan it in for us and it comes up on our side as a PDF, that it is easy for them to read it. All right, so keep that in mind. Right, your first section is going to focus you on your novel, My Family and Other Animals, and in your literature study guide, you know that you can start from page 69 onwards with your notes and your questions and things like that. Keep in mind that these notes and these activities have been created so that you practice your critical thinking skills. So work through the questions, make sure you understand what they are expecting from you. Right, just a few things that I thought from my side I could add in around your novel, perhaps 4 general themes that you've come across so far. I'm sure you've picked up on these topics. First of all, My Family and Other Animals immediately tells you that one of the themes could be about family, and we know how funny his family can be. They are quite humorous descriptions. remind yourself of the chaos around their family or the drama around their family. Make sure you know who all his family are. And although they're a little bit quirky, a little bit odd, I'm sure that there are significant things about each member that you can recall. Obviously, again, relating to the title, animals, all right, come up, and we know that Gerald is that character that is mostly connected to this theme. Is he the only one, though? Think of the animals that you have read about so far. What is Gerald's thinking around them? Why does he keep them? Why does he want to save them? And things like that. The theme of adapting. Obviously, this is a family who moves to a new home, to a new country. They experience a new culture. They definitely experience brand new weather. Think about the British weather compared to where they are in Corsica, in Corfu. Compare England now to Corfu. All right. Take note of how it seems difficult for them to adapt at the beginning of the novel, but then eventually what starts to happen? Do they begin to love the locals? Who are the locals that they get to know? What is that feeling of freedom that they perhaps start feeling? And do they begin to experience the sense of community? Think of examples in the plot that can be linked to those ideas. And then obviously the theme of community. I mean, there are a bunch of strangers moving into Corfu. They go into the strange house at the end of the pier on the water's edge. Think of the interesting people they meet. What is their relationship with Spiro, with Dr. Theodore? Do any of them seem eccentric? Think of their housekeeper when it comes to that. Think of Larry's friends who pop up for visits along the way. I think if you are guided by these prompts, you definitely are going to have a full picture of the novel as you've read it so far. All right, then your next section of your exam is going to focus you on your poetry. So from about page 46 in your study guide, that's where we come across your poetry questions and notes and theory around all the poems. So just like you would have done for earlier in the year, there are certain points around poetry that you can tick off for each of the poems that you've studied. Make sure you understand what their main ideas are. So what are their themes? What is the message that the poet is putting across to you? You can look at the form. So is it a sonnet or a free verse, for example? How is the poem structured? How many stanzas does it have, for example? How many lines does it have? You can then take a look at the different word choices that the poet uses. Are there any rhyming words? Are there any words that are repeated? And if they are repeated, what is their significance? What is their role? What is their purpose in the poem? You can start picking up then on the poet's attitude. So what is the tone of the poem? How do you think the poet would have read the poem themselves? And then obviously being poetry, you can definitely look for your figurative writing. What are the linguistic devices? What are the literary devices that the poet has used? And especially if they're painting a picture for us to imagine. Pick up on the similes, the metaphors, the personification, and things like that. Rhyme and rhythm, it is poetry, is it not? So you can pick up on if there's a word choices that help bring about rhyme. So is there end rhyme? Is the rhyming taking place inside the lines? Is there a rhyme scheme? Is there a certain pace when you read the poem? And how is that pace created? Does it come down to the punctuation that the poet has used? Has he used enjambment, so your run-on lines from one line into another? All of these things are things that you can take each of your scene poems and tick off these notes around each of those poems before going into your exam. Right, and then you obviously will have an unseen poem. How do you approach that unseen poem? I've given you a few things that you can think about beforehand. You're going to look at the title of the poem, obviously. Is there perhaps an intended message there by the poet? Read the poem. Literally read the poem at least twice before you attempt the questions. Take a look at each stanza then. Are there a certain number of lines? Does the poem flow from one stanza to the next? Is it telling us a story? If there are a number of lines in each stanza, what type of stanza is it then? Is it a quatrain? Is it a tercet? Or is it perhaps made up of rhyming couplets? Look at the words that are used. Are there particular phrases that are repeated? Does this link to the message the poet is bringing across? Is it reinforcing the message? Then you can look at the atmosphere or the mood of the poem. Is the imagery helping with this? Is there a dictionary meaning to some words, or is there more the deeper symbolic meaning? What is the purpose of the poem? Was the poet looking to amuse us or entertain us or inform us of something? What is his message carried over to us? And then think of the things that you can control yourself. Know your different types of figures of speeches. What sound devices are being used? Is there onomatopoeia, for example? What type of poem could you expect? Could it be a sonnet? Will it have 14 lines? Is it a free verse poem? So is there no set rhyme scheme? And then obviously go back to your question words and understand what a question word is expecting of you in your answer. Right, so what does an actual exam look like? And I always like you to be aware of these things. Please keep in mind, I've used an old exam paper here, so the poetry that is used in this exam may differ to your poetry list for this year. In which case, use all the poetry in this past paper as a practice for unseen poetry. All right, so your first section of your exam will focus you on your novel. You must answer all of the questions, grade 11s. There's no point leaving something out. Make an attempt so that your marker can at least look for an answer. Let's have a look then at question 1.2. All right, I'm going to just point out a few of them. I'm not doing all the questions with you. When we ask you to comment on something about each of the characters, we're actually directly checking that you know the plot and you know how a specific moment will affect it. All right, so in this case, we're asking about their different interests. So you can't just wing it here and go and learn only about the main characters. You do need to know about the other secondary characters as well. In question 4, we ask you to explain the significance of a figure of speech. Remember, when we ask you about a figure of speech's significance, we're asking you to explain what is it helping you to imagine. Question 1.5, we refer you to the word implied. So in this case, what is implied by the word herded? Remember, implied means that there's an underlying meaning. It's not your dictionary meaning for the word herded. In this case, it's what is the deeper meaning around it? What is the significance? Question 7 says, do you think it was wise of the family to leave their home in England and move to Corfu? Remember, this is an opinion question, but it can't just be your opinion. Your opinion has been guided by what you've read so far in your novel. So it's not just your opinion. You're not going to get your full mark for it. You also need to base it on what you've read so far. So you think it's a good idea they've moved to Corfu because these are the great things they've experienced, or you don't think it's a great idea because these are the terrible things that they've encountered. You need to make sure your answer is based on what you've read so far. Right, we'll often give you 2 extracts to look at. All right, so don't just think you must answer one part. If you look at question 10 there, we say, critically comment on the fact that Jerry is not speaking in this extract. So when we ask you to critically comment on something, we want you to explain his behavior, his reasons, and give evidence from the novel. So it could be evidence from the extract we've given you, or you can recall something from elsewhere in the plot that you've read that can be significant to your answer here. Question 15. Do you think this type of informal education is any advantage to Jerry? So again, you've been asked for what you think, so your opinion, but you can't just give your opinion. So you can't just say yes. You need to say what your opinion is and give evidence from the text to justify your answer, to support your answer. Right, your second part is your poetry section. All right, so again, I'm just going to point out the type of questions that are significant for me at the moment. If you look at question 2, it says list 4 settings in a poem. Grade 11, that's literally asking you to go and find answers in the text, in the poem. 2.8, what does the speaker learn in this poem? So basically, what is the lesson of this poem? What is the message of this poem? Right, what lesson does the speaker learn? In other words, what is the reader going to learn as well? All right, so that's your deeper, significant question. In your second poem, right, remember we're going to always ask you more than one. Let's look at question 1 there. It says explain the significance of the title of the poem. So you think you just need to know the content of the poem. Grade 11s, remember, even the title is something significant. So keep that in mind. Discuss in what way the title contrasts with the content of the poem. Remember, contrast means it is different. If we compare something, you're finding similarities, and if you contrast it, you're finding the differences. Question 3.4.2, what will follow or come in its place? You're going to base your answer here on what you know you've read in the poem. Question 3.6 asks you to quote 2 words from specific lines. Literally go find the words. Remember to quote them in inverted commas. And the last question there asks you to justify your answer. So you will give your thoughts, but you need to elaborate on your thoughts a bit and find evidence from the poem to support your thoughts there again. Okay, good. So grade 11s, I hope that I've prompted you to think about a few things in a different way about your novel and about your poetry. I'm hoping that I've answered some of your questions you might have been wondering about in the build up to this. But most importantly, I believe that if you've gone through your study guides and you've worked through your notes and you've gone through each of your poems beforehand and you've read what you've had to read up until now, that you will have this. You've got this, grade 11s. So I wish you well. I look forward to seeing what your answers are, and I will chat to you again.